Shadow Hack. Chapter 731, Devil God Well. Zeus didn't get angry. Instead, he sneered and said, I only married my daughter to him as a delaying tactic. Now that he no longer possesses the qualifications to be married to my daughter, don't tell me that I have to let her stay as a little concubine. Zeus, henceforth, there's no relation between your heavenly gods' council and my two poles of morning and evening. Our gods don't want to collaborate with a shameless guy like you. You. Zeus snorted at Ra. Right then, his complete attention was focused on dealing with Scandinavian God Council, and he didn't have the time to deal with the people of two poles of morning and evening. In his eyes, they weren't worth mentioning. It was Asgard that was his true aim. Countless battles had happened between Olympus and Asgard before. Every time, Scandinavia had suffered disastrous losses, but Odin was still a formidable opponent for Zeus. Only with Li Yunmu's appearance did the relation between Olympus and Asgard start to change. But once the news of Li Yunmu's loss of strength spread everywhere, chaos threatened to cover the entire origin world. The Eight and Heavenly Gods Council, which had been enemies before, now planned to attack Scandinavia together. Their joint attack would probably ensure the total ruination of Scandinavia. Without Li Yunmu, Scandinavia was like a sheet of loose sand in Zeus' eyes. Shiva, our alliance will definitely erase Scandinavia from the origin world's map, then we can divide its territory among ourselves. Once Odin dies, their master god Ymir will also perish. At that time, only our Olympus and your eight will exist in the West world. What about the two poles of morning and evening? Shiva asked calmly. Two poles of morning and evening? Ha ha ha, they aren't even worth mentioning. Previously, they had been divided, which had made their losses disastrous. Now, although they have joined hands, they only rule over a small area. After we destroy Scandinavia, we will crush the two poles of morning and evening. God Shiva suddenly turned toward the eastern domain and indifferently said, Do you think the origin world only has the land of ice and the desert ocean? Zeus's eyes shone brightly. Don't tell me that you still have ambitions that spread to the eastern domain's ancient lands? That is a very mysterious region. God Shiva laughed coldly. Don't tell me you don't have any ambitions? We have never been involved with the eastern domain's ancient lands and have only heard legends about it, so we have been thinking that it is extremely mysterious and never dared to attack it. Unless we give it a try, how would we really know who is weak and who is strong? God Shiva's words caused Zeus' eyes to brighten. He hadn't expected that God Shiva's appetite would be even larger than his own. He only wanted to capture the land of ice to fully satisfy his ambition, yet the leader of the eight also wanted to capture the eastern domain. Zeus calmly replied. That is even better. Wait until we capture the land of ice, and I will help your eight to eradicate the two poles of morning and evening. Then you can comfortably proceed to see the true situation of the eastern domain, Zeus said calmly. God Shiva nodded, then said, We will first deal with the matter at hand. Li Yunmu didn't know that the western part of the origin world was extremely lively. The news of the Eight and Heavenly Gods Council jointly attacking Scandinavia didn't reach his ears. In Yuan Baiao's eyes, when Li Yunmu said that he would embark on the devil path, he appeared to be completely earnest, as if he truly didn't have any other way to survive. She had never seen him speak so seriously, which probably meant that his words right then were completely true. If the powers of the origin world learn that my strength has declined, then do you know what they will do? Li Yunmu asked Yuan Baiao. They will use their full strength to kill me. Since all of them are afraid of the being residing in my body, they will definitely attack me. Those words were Li Yunmu's deepest secret, but he revealed it to Yuan Baiao, which stunned her. On one side were the so-called justice and righteousness, which Fuxi and Nuwa had told her about, while on the other side was the sentiment, which was extremely difficult for her to give up. Any person facing such a choice would find it difficult to make a decision. Yuan Baiao was extremely confused in her heart, but more than anything, she wanted to fight for the injustice done to Li Yunmu. Why was the world so dismal? Li Yunmu's condition was completely because of her. But when she remembered that Fuxi and Nuwa, in whom she had complete trust, had abandoned Li Yunmu at his most difficult time, she had a feeling that there might not be much truth in their words. Because of that, she decided to stick with Li Yunmu. "All right, you say, what should we do? I will help you." The system's voice echoed in Li Yunmu's mind then. "Just a moment ago, I scanned the ancient lands and grasped all the information about it. If you really want to increase your cultivation quickly, you can go to another place besides the primordial god world. However, this region can be considered as the forbidden one in the ancient lands. If Fuxi and Nuwa knew that you would turn into a complete devil, they would have definitely cut the weeds and eliminated them to the root. I don't care about that, so guide me to that place. Even if it is hell, I will still go." When the system saw Li Yunmu's resolution, it said, "That place is Devil God Well. There's a fine line between gods and devils. If you charge into the Devil God Well, your cultivation will definitely increase. However, whether you turn into a devil or a god, that will completely depend on your cultivation." Li Yunmu nodded, then said to Yuan Biao, "I want to go to the Devil God Well." Yuan Biao's eyes went wide. She creased her brow and immediately refused. Don't you know what sort of region the Devil God Well is? I won't permit you to go." When Yuan Biao tried to stop him, Li Yunmu spoke again. "Regardless of how dangerous it is, I only care that it will increase my cultivation quickly. I heard that it isn't any inferior to your primordial god world." Yuan Biao retreated a few steps. She suddenly remembered that apart from primordial god world, only the devil god world could allow Li Yunmu to increase his cultivation. She had seen many people who were seeking instant benefits and wanted to increase their cultivation to god realm by hook or crook enter the devil god well. All of them had turned into devils without any exception. After they entered the devil path, they were executed by Fuxi and Nuwa on the spot. They died extremely painful deaths. Chapter 732, Scandinavia in a desperate situation. When Yuan Biao thought that it was possible for Li Yunmu to fall to the devil path and become the target of execution, she shuddered in her heart. But if Li Yunmu didn't enter the devil god well, how else would he increase his strength quickly? This question was extremely complicated. Yuan Biao would rather have Li Yunmu hide in the eastern domain and live a comfortable life instead of facing dangers. "Li Yunmu, hear me out. You don't have much strength right now, so you don't need to shoulder all the responsibilities of the world. You can calmly recuperate here and, with no one disturbing us, we will live happily." Looking at Yuan Biao's expectant face and hopeful eyes, Li Yunmu was slightly startled. He realized that there was truth to her words, and anyone could get tired. Sometimes Li Yunmu also felt that he needed a rest. It wasn't really necessary for him to get involved in all the disputes in the world. He had already rescued his world, and everything else wasn't worth staking his life for it. He also began to think that it would be better for him to take Yuan Biao's advice and find a place which the two of them could call their own world. Just as Li Yunmu made his decision, the system suddenly gave him news which filled his gaze with astonishment. "Scandinavia is in a desperate situation. The news that your strength has decreased has already spread. Zeus and Shiva will probably be unable to stay still." Li Yunmu was startled. Do they intend to join hands and deal with Scandinavia? Shouldn't there be an enmity between Zeus and the Eight because of last time? How could they suddenly want to deal with Scandinavia jointly? Haha, what kind of person do you think Zeus is? Everything in his world is ruled by one word, profit. If collaborating with the Eight can bring him profit, why would he refuse? Moreover, there have been several years of resentments and grudges between Olympus and Asgard. How could they be resolved so easily? Li Yunmu hadn't expected that the matter would be so complicated. He couldn't refrain from asking with a frown, "Given my present strength, I am only a trash in the eyes of Zeus and the Eight. Even if I leave this place, where should I go?" "Then you don't want to save Brunhilde?" She is your first wife. You want to disregard everything for Untitled. Then what about Brunhilde? The system's words touched Li Yunmu's heart, and he took a deep breath. All right, I will go. But what should be done about Untitled? Coax her to sleep at night and then leave. I have already opened the map of the ancient lands and marked the devil god well for you. You only need to follow the map to reach your destination. In the evening, Li Yunmu coaxed Untitled to sleep, then put a sleep incantation on her so she would fall into a deeper sleep. Using the energy in the surroundings, he wrote her a letter and sealed the cave so that others couldn't enter it before she left. The devil god well was located at the center of the ancient lands. It was protected by fire god Zurong and river god Gonggong, but the two of them kept fighting continuously without bothering about the devil god well in the least. This meant that Li Yunmu didn't face any obstructions when trying to reach the vicinity of the devil god well in the deep of night. This is the devil god well. Li Yunmu curiously looked at the enormous well, which was pitch black inside, while the two guardian gods were busy fighting not far away from him. Gonggong, you still haven't stopped attacking, do you want to continue fighting? Humph, Zurong, do you think that your status in the ancient lands is very high? You are even inferior to the battle god Xingtian. Pa! Aren't you Gonggong the same as me? Seems like I will have to teach you a good lesson today. Li Yunmu used the opportunity when the two ancient gods were not paying any attention to jump into the devil god well. When he entered the devil god well, he found no water but a black energy that was constantly revolving around him. It made the place look extremely gloomy. Could it be that everyone who came down had fallen to the devil path? What exactly was the reason behind it? The system then explained it to him. After entering here, everyone first have to subdue their inner demons. If they are unable to do so, they fall to the devil path. If they subdue their inner demons, they become gods. Because of the two extremes, this region has come to be known as the devil god well. Li Yunmu nodded while feeling the black energy permeating his body and gradually eroding it. What exactly is this black energy? It is the essence which will increase your cultivation, but the effects of it will depend upon your inner strength. If you cannot subdue your inner demons, this black energy will become more and more turbid and dark. But if you can subdue your inner demons, it will gradually transform into white energy. Whether you end up as a devil or a god, it will depend upon your thoughts. Sit down, then begin to cultivate here. No one but your inner demons will disturb you in this place. Under the system's guidance, Li Yunmu sat down with his eyes closed. He felt the energy moving against the flow, attacking his entire body, and sweat broke out on his forehead. Before you start cultivating, I have one more thing to tell you. The passage of time inside the devil god world is extremely slow. Even if you cultivate for half a month in this place, only 4 hours would have passed outside. That's why you don't need to worry about Scandinavia's situation. You should focus only on increasing your cultivation quickly. You can take care of other things later. The system's words put Li Yunmu's mind at ease, and he gradually calmed his heart down. He then began to rotate the energy inside his body and started to cultivate. But trying to calm his mind in the devil god well was even more difficult compared to the outside world. Only after some time did Li Yunmu find the right state. After that, his strength began to increase by leaps and bounds in the devil god well. From lower stage Sage Flux Expert, he broke through to mid-stage Sage Flux Expert. Then, he entered late-stage Sage Flux Expert level with complete ease, but when he reached the Great Circle of Sage Flux Expert, he finally encountered a bottleneck. Regardless of how Li Yunmu tried, he couldn't continue breaking through. A dark shadow had appeared in his body. It soon began to emit a demonic presence while slowly revealing a twisted smile. Chapter 733, The Evil Shadow. Obediently come to the other side, then become the overlord of the devil world. All those gods don't care about you, so why should you throw your life away for them? Is it not good to be selfish? The shadow constantly whispered in Li Yunmu's ear. Large beads of sweat rolled down Li Yunmu's forehead. He couldn't help but ask, "Who exactly are you? Who is it?" He kept checking his surroundings constantly, sensing that he should be faced with the legendary illusion. Given his strength right then, it shouldn't have been difficult for him to break it, but he just couldn't get rid of it, and he didn't understand why. Everything seemed extremely real around him, which made him fall into the illusion again and again. What exactly is this place? When that question appeared in his heart, the black shadow in front of him suddenly began to howl with laughter. "I am you. You are me. We are one. I am your shadow." Li Yunmu shook his head. "Wrong, my shadows are all extremely mild and gentle, not vicious like you." "Ha ha ha, you really are accusing me wrongly. I've lain dormant for a long time, waiting for this day to arrive." Before his words fell to the ground, countless shadows appeared around Li Yunmu. They were the ones produced by the system for him, and all of them began to howl miserably while facing the evil shadow. Li Yunmu became extremely furious and said, "What exactly are you doing to them? Stay your hand." The more intensely Li Yunmu shouted, the more sinister the shadow's smile became. "I am the evil in your heart. Every person has both good and evil in them. The garbage you created previously were trash among trash, and all of them were gentle. Only by using shadows like me could you become an overlord," he said with a slight smile. The more the evil shadow spoke, the fiercer he became. While on the side, Li Yunmu was like a victim of kidnapping, unable to move in the slightest. "Don't struggle, I decide everything in this space. What exactly do you think you are doing?" "What do I think I am doing? Naturally, I am throwing you into despair so you would abandon your stupid kind thoughts. I will assist you in unleashing your inner evil, and you will become the most powerful person in the world. Everyone will learn to fear and dread you." Li Yunmu bit his lip. "This isn't what I want." "Oh, you don't want it? All right, then I will show you some scenes from the future. You will see the price of your weakness. Without the powerful me, you are only an ant in this world." Then, the sinister shadow produced a picture in Li Yunmu's mind, and Li Yunmu suddenly felt as if his head had swollen up. This should be impossible. How did he do it? Scandinavia had surprisingly fallen, and Brunhilde was dead. Odin was also dead, while the territory of Scandinavia had been divided by Zeus and Shiva. The two poles of morning and evening, which had unified themselves recently, fell into a war again while Zeus and Shiva were attacking ancient lands. What sort of scene was that? The two villains truly intended to conquer the origin world for themselves. Do you feel helpless? Despaired? Impotent? Ah! Li Yunmu yelled without end. Given his strength, he wouldn't be able to rescue those whom he cherished. The evil shadow gave him a treacherous smile, and said, "Since this scene didn't send you into despair, then you will appreciate what else I have prepared for you." Li Yunmu felt as if his head was about to split open. "Ah!" Another miserable howl echoed, and gradually, the scene in his mind became clearer. The experts from the other planes whom he had engulfed had arrived on Earth and attacked Lucky Wind City and broken through its defenses. They carried out a blood purge inside the city, and Linuero and his parents died tragically. Even his four shadows turned into smoke. Li Yunmu knelt down on the ground with his eyes about to crack apart. The sense of loss was pushing him into despair, and both his eyes turned red. "Dad, Mom, Linuero. Aren't these scenes very wonderful? Do you feel despair? If you feel it, then you can turn to evil and increase your strength." "No." Li Yunmu took a deep breath. He knew that everything was fake, and he couldn't let the evil shadow in front of him take control of him. "These are all fake. Everything is fake." Li Yunmu was resolute in throwing away what he saw from his mind. He wasn't willing to accept the scenes he saw as facts. "Why aren't you willing to concede? Hey, since this is the case, you should see some despairing scenes personally." "What the hell are you thinking? Throw them all at me. How can I make you feel despair and helplessness? Li Yunmu knew that the evil shadow in front of him was his biggest inner demon. Only by subduing him could he transform. What he saw was insufficient to sway his heart, but the good shadows were being crushed by the evil shadow right then. They were suddenly engulfed by the evil shadow, who was much more formidable than them, and he began to wantonly trample on them. Looking at the good shadow's bitter expressions, Li Yunmu's expression turned somewhat sluggish. He wanted to prevent it, but he still couldn't move his body. Stop, 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 stop. Don't hurt them, don't. Li Yunmu shouted himself hoarse, but the evil shadow only jeered at him even more intensely. You must remember that no one in this world sympathizes with weaklings. Only the formidable have the right to exist, while weaklings will always be trampled by them. When saying the last words, the evil shadow kept crushing the heads of the good shadows in front of Li Yunmu. Li Yunmu's body shuddered, he was in true despair right then. He felt helpless, and this sort of mental state could only keep him stuck at the bottleneck without allowing him to ever break through. I want power. I want strength. I want to protect the people close to me. I want power. Li Yunmu's howls gradually calmed down, and his eyes turned empty. He was finally turned into a mortal thirsting for power by the torment of the evil shadow. Chapter 734, Defeat in Battle. In Lucky Wind City, Lin Yuero was facing a crisis that resembled that of Li Yunmu. She didn't know where so many experts had come from. They were all eyeing Lucky Wind City covetously, and they had already broken the city's defense system. Given that Lucky Wind City had already sunk into a crisis, the supreme transcending level experts guarding the city couldn't help but start panicking. There are many high-level experts among the enemies outside. City Lord, what should we do? Lin Yuero could see an imminent crisis Lucky Wind City. If the enemy broke through the gates, a massacre would be certainly carried out inside the city's walls. However, she had no idea how so many people from other planes had suddenly descended on Earth. After Li Yunmu devoured the other planes, Lin Yuero had been feeling extremely restless in her heart. Yet she hadn't expected that everything would happen so quickly, catching her off guard. She not only had the burden of the entire Lucky Wind City, but also of the lives of Li Yunmu's parents as well as many officers and soldiers. As the Lord of Lucky Wind City, she couldn't make an erroneous judgment based on her selfish desires. The best course of action for her right then was to retreat from Lucky Wind City as quickly as possible and find a place to hide for some time. If she decided to fight until death, then Lucky Wind City would turn into hell. City Lord. We cannot continue protecting our city, the enemy is too formidable. City Lord, the situation is not good. I had initially gone to order the sneak attack squad to withdraw, but they were surrounded by the enemy, and the losses in the squad were disastrous. City Lord, not good. The enemy will probably enter through the western gate. Quickly leave. City Lord. Bad news arrived in succession, and all the soldiers and officers were astonished. When had their city lord ever cut such a sorry figure? Previously, she had led them to rampage around the world, allowing them to build their foundation on Earth. But on that day, because of the people from other planes, she was forced into such a tough position. Lin Yuero's body quivered slightly. She had lived on her plane for her whole life, and she was then defeated by someone who was even more terrifying than her in terms of tactics and strategies. He could even guess her next course of action. The Western Gate was originally supposed to be used for retreat, but she hadn't expected that the enemy would even figure that out. The battle right then could be said to be her complete loss. City Lord, we must retreat quickly. If we don't go now, we won't be able to leave once the enemy enters the city. Lin Yuero retreated a few steps. What she was seeing wasn't the result she wanted, but the battle had already been lost, and the die had been cast. She felt that she didn't have the face to see Li Yunmu again. She suddenly pulled out her sword, wanting to kill herself. Numerous soldiers and officers rushed forward to snatch the sword from her hands. City Lord, you mustn't act foolishly. We must withdraw now, but we will retrieve Lucky Wind City in the future. But if you die, we truly won't have any hope of returning here. When Lin Yuero looked at the hopeful gazes of the soldiers and officers, a layer of mist covered her eyes. If it were not because of her mistaken judgment, the calamity wouldn't have come to them. She was extremely remorseful in her heart. But there was no medicine for regret in the world, and she knew that regretting one's choices was useless. She bit her lip and commanded, "Heed my orders. Everyone withdraw from here. Li Tian, Li Dai, you are responsible for taking Li Yunmu's parents out of the city. We all will meet at the previous base of vampires." When the soldiers heard Lin Yuero's commands, their spirits rose. As long as their city lord could uplift herself, they would have hope to return to Lucky Wind City. If Lin Yuero had turned completely depressed, then the soldiers would have had a terrible ending as well. Lucky Wind City was not calm. When the commoners heard that the enemy was attacking, they shut down the gates of their homes, not daring to even take a peek outside. Lin Yuero fled from the city with many soldiers. When they were some distance away, she looked at the brightly lit Lucky Wind City in a profound manner. How many people had placed their hopes on her? Moreover, when Li Yunmu had handed over Lucky Wind City to her, she hadn't thought that one day she would have to surrender it like she had done with Heavenly Cloud City. She was very unwilling in her heart, but without any other alternative, she couldn't do anything else. She would definitely return to Lucky Wind City. Lin Yuero turned around and left towards the camp of vampires that was not far away. She was leaving, but resolved that one day she would definitely recapture Lucky Wind City. She definitely wouldn't disappoint Li Yunmu. Li Tian and Li Da also arrived at the camp of vampires with Li Yunmu's parents. At this moment, the army was completely fatigued. The entire camp was lifeless, without anyone in a good mood after losing a battle like that. Lin Yuero was even more vexed. Her illustrious name as the city lord had been tarnished on that day. City lord, you don't need to think about it much. Lucky Wind City's loss wasn't your mistake, it was just that the enemy was more formidable. Lin Yuero shook her head. No, I grew complacent and completely forgot about being vigilant in times of peace. I relaxed for too long, and didn't think about increasing the strength of the soldiers. This was the biggest reason for this defeat. If we possessed formidable strength before the invaders descended, why would we have needed to be afraid of them? Lin Yuero was filled with remorse and gulped the entire jug of wine in one swig. City Lord, we trust that you can certainly snatch Lucky Wind City back from those people. But obtaining something that had already been lost was easier said than done. At night, the moonlight was like water, and Lin Yuero enjoyed it for a moment. Who knew what would the invaders do to the common people of the city? Inside Lucky Wind City, miserable wails echoed continuously. The majority of the common people were being massacred by the invaders. They used the deaths to vent their feelings for Li Yunmu devouring their plains. After becoming the new city lord, Cass began to interrogate the bound-up commoners. Tell me, where is Li Yunmu? Tell me and you can continue living peacefully without enduring any suffering. The commoner trembled from head to toe and constantly begged for forgiveness. Lord, spare our lives. I request you to let me go, I truly don't know anything. I don't know where Li Yunmu is. I truly don't know, I beg you to let me go. Cass stabbed the commoner, then looked at another one coldly and said, You should know what's going to happen next. I really don't know. Really don't know. Chapter 735, Request. The commoner kept shaking his head constantly while his trousers were already soaked wet. However, what came for him was a stab of a remorseless blade. When a craven and cowardly commoner saw the two people lying on the ground, he promptly said all he knew. He went to the origin world. I beg you to let me go now. Origin world? Humph. Just a person who refuses to face reality. Stab. Since you have already told me about Li Yunmu, you don't have any worth left. Better if you die. When the other commoners saw the new city lord being so brutal, they were so scared that they didn't dare to even open their mouths. At that moment, Cass suddenly gave a new command. I have already obtained information regarding Li Yunmu, so these trashes are useless. You can all play with them however you want. Cass's words gave free hand to the experts of the other planes, and they began to massacre the commoners. The city filled with miserable wails as the dying howled in grief and pain. The reason why the experts did that was because Li Yunmu had devoured their planes, killing all of their loved ones. The commoners didn't know where Li Yunmu's family was, but as long as they could kill people of the world that swallowed theirs, they didn't care who they were. The city wailed like a ghost, which woke Lin Yuero up at the vampire camp. Once she thought how lucky Wind City had fallen into enemy hands, she felt restless. The inside of Lucky Wind City was still brightly lit, but Lin Yuero felt a stab of pain in her heart. She felt as if she was being suffocated. However, everything had already happened, and she could only sob spasmodically. In the western region, Asgard was in the same state as Lucky Wind City, being attacked by two powers. The Rainbow Bridge had been broken, and Asgard was in imminent danger. Athena hadn't expected that her motherland Olympus would suddenly attack Scandinavia, causing a calamity to fall upon the land of ice. Li Yunmu hadn't yet returned, and Scandinavia met with a great danger. How could the numerous gods of Scandinavia not be furious? They wanted to go out and battle, but Odin chose to withdraw. He wanted to continue stalling in hopes that Li Yunmu would return in a timely manner and settle the desperate situation. But what left him incomparably disappointed was that since Li Yunmu had left the western region, he hadn't returned once. Who knew whether something had happened to him or not? Father! Why are you not facing the reality of the situation? I cannot continue to endure any more. The heavenly gods' counsel is being excessive. Once they learned that my husband's strength has decreased, they immediately rose to fight against us. At this time, Thunder God Thor looked at Athena and quickly locked her throat with the hammer. Then we can use his daughter to threaten that old bastard. Athena remained calm in front of the danger and said, "It's useless. You all will only disgrace yourselves by doing so. I know Zeus better than you. He doesn't care about the life of his daughter. When he wants to get something, he won't stop for anything." After hearing Athena's reply, Thunder God Thor hesitated for a moment. Odin, who was sitting on the throne, waved his hand. "Let her go. Since she has already married Li Yunmu, she is his wife. We need to protect her and not use her as a bargaining chip." Odin's words made Thor loosen his grip on Athena. Father's words are correct. You using Athena to threaten Zeus is useless. Then what should we do now? Do you want to continue sitting here, waiting for our deaths? Li Yunmu still hadn't returned, and Scandinavia's numerous gods fell into a panic. If the Heavenly Gods' Council had come by themselves, the Scandinavian God Council would have the strength to battle them, but there was also the Eight with them. The strength of the Eight was well known. Previously, they had defeated the Eight together with Heavenly Gods' Council and both sides had suffered great casualties. Who knew what sort of benefits did the Eight promised Zeus for him to ally with them? Zeus' ambitions are wild, and you don't understand his thought process. His aim is to unify the entire origin world. Perhaps the Eight promised some benefits to him that are related to your Scandinavia, which is why Zeus decided to make an all-out effort. Otherwise, I truly cannot think of any other reason. Brunhilde could only choose to believe Athena's words, since she had already married Li Yunmu. While considering any matter, she should first think about her husband's safety. Otherwise, if her husband died, she would also be doomed. If you all are willing to believe me, then I will go to persuade Zeus, Athena calmly continued. Although he doesn't care much about father and daughter relations, only I can properly negotiate with him. He wouldn't even hear a single word from anyone else. Moreover, I can also help you stall for some time. If we can stall until Li Yunmu returns, it would be for the best. Thor was the first to react, and he furiously said, "No. Who knows what sort of intentions you have? I am the first to disagree, and no one will be able to persuade me. Someone else can go and talk with Zeus but not you. What if you ran away? You said that using you to threaten Zeus is useless, but is it really? Why should we believe you?" Brunhilde took a deep breath. After spending time with Li Yunmu, her fiery temperament had improved greatly. She calmly said, "I believe her. Let her go. If she really wants to return to Zeus' side, then that is also fine. We shouldn't stop anyone. Being attacked by two powers from the sides is the fate of our Scandinavia, and we cannot rely on or blame anyone else for that." Brunhilde's words raised everyone's spirits slightly and moved heavenly gods' council's Athena. Was she always so trustworthy in this woman's eyes? Athena looked at Brunhilde with a profound gaze, then said with a sob, "Many thanks for sister's trust. I will definitely not fail to live up to your expectations." Odin waved his hand, also hinting that he agreed to Athena negotiating with Zeus. He tacitly agreed with Brunhilde's words. Athena took a deep bow and left while Thor said to Odin in confusion, "Father, why did you release that woman? What if she becomes the greatest threat to our Scandinavia in the future? My son, you should learn from thou's younger sister. Everything cannot be forced, so let her go. If she cares about our Scandinavia, she will definitely return," Odin said calmly. Chapter 736, Envoy. Brunhilde also thought like that. If Athena truly had only Li Yunmu in her heart, she would certainly return. She wouldn't cower and retreat in front of her father because of the large attack about to happen on Scandinavia. When Athena arrived before the two warring camps, and Zeus saw his daughter, he became extremely happy. If Athena could turn into a mole for them, then exterminating Scandinavia would become even more easier. "Daughter, you arrived at the perfect time. Now is the time for you to contribute to Olympus and become the mole in Scandinavia, then we can coordinate from inside and outside to completely eradicate Scandinavia." "Father, your daughter has come to persuade you to withdraw your soldiers and not to act as a mole for you. What are you saying? Withdraw soldiers? Athena, you forgot your identity. You are an ancient god of Olympus, so don't tell me that you intend to betray your mother country and cross blades with your father." "Father, I am married to Li Yunmu now. I am his wife, and he is from Scandinavia. As his wife, I am also belong to Scandinavia. Right now, I came here to representing Scandinavia to persuade you to withdraw your soldiers." "Ha ha ha, this is a great joke. Withdraw soldiers? Once Scandinavia is extinguished, do you know what great benefits our Olympus will obtain? Father, you are trying to save a little only to lose a lot. Do you really think Scandinavia's territory is so easy to obtain? If the Eight hadn't enticed you by some small benefits, would they have allied with you to battle against Scandinavia? Can't you understand the principle of temporary dependence? You mustn't put yourself into dire straits because of some small profits. You should clearly understand the strength of the Eight. Earlier, you allied with the Scandinavian God Council and were still only able to defeat them with great casualties. Yet now you are joining them to eliminate Scandinavia. After it is destroyed, the only remaining target of the Eight will be you, Father." Zeus snorted coldly. "Nonsense! Your father possesses a vast territory with abundant resources. Why should I fear the Eight? Even if they want to battle us, we can join together with the two poles of morning and evening to deal with them. Have you possibly not heard the news? My husband Li Yunmu unified the two poles of morning and evening and is their benefactor. You are trying to destroy their benefactor's country, so do you really think that the two poles of morning and evening will still join your side? Even if your previous relationship with two poles of morning and evening was very good, that cannot determine the future. If there's a day when they change sides, what will you do? You will be isolated and without help. Clearly, Scandinavia with which you are related by marriage is your only true friend, but you want to destroy them for a little benefit. What about leaving yourself a path of retreat, father? Hearing Athena's logic, Zeus couldn't help but take a few steps back. He had never expected his thoughts to be less mature than those of this own daughter Athena. Her speech struck him like a thunderbolt and made him unable to stay still. He began to ponder. Athena's words weren't without reason. If he continued to obstinately cling to his chosen course of action, then even if he obtained half the territory of Scandinavia after it was eliminated, then when the Eight would attack him, he would be caught unprepared. At that time, the Eight would spare no effort to destroy Asgard and Olympus. Their Council of Eight had the ambition to unify the entire origin world, and even the eastern domain had been mentioned earlier. Shiva actually wanted to dip his fingers into the territory of the eastern domain. From that, it was clear that his ambitions were even greater than those of Zeus. Father, daughter has said what she came to say. If you continue to be dogmatic, your daughter will side with Scandinavia and fighting against you as well as the Eight to the end. After Athena finished speaking, she turned around to leave. Zeus suddenly looked at her. Daughter, don't tell me you aren't willing to return to your father. Athena stopped in her tracks, turned around, and said, Father, as I said, my husband is Scandinavian, so I and Scandinavia will advance and retreat together. Zeus took a deep breath before saying, Daughter, I heard your advice to abandon my attack on Scandinavia. It would be better for us to negotiate it and coordinate an attack from both sides to eliminate the Eight. They have designs on the entire origin world, and they are constantly looking for ways to awaken their master god Brahma. They clearly intend to unify the entire origin world and reign supreme. All right. I will report it to Odin, so you will need to wait for news back from him. Just when Athena left, she coincidentally ran into Shiva. He glanced at her and then came to find Zeus. Your daughter came to see you. Zeus nodded with a laugh. Ha ha ha, yes. My daughter is ultimately the goddess of wisdom in the heavenly gods' council. Just a moment ago, we negotiated about how to deal with Scandinavia in one fell swoop. If we can obtain your daughter's assistance, then we can annihilate Scandinavia quickly. Shiva's gaze turned avaricious. Once Scandinavia is destroyed, don't forget about half of my territory. I won't forget. You just focus on your role. Shiva said coldly. In his heart, however, he greatly despised Zeus, who followed his guidance blindly just for a little profit. He was truly a stupid person. Shiva had already planned out in his heart how he was going to destroy the heavenly gods' council. After Scandinavia was annihilated, they would capture Zeus' Olympus. At that time, the entire western region apart from the two poles of morning and evening would be under their control. Zeus had his own intentions too, so both sides were scheming against each other. In the palace hall, Thor was already somewhat impatient. He coldly said, I knew that B*TCH Athena was unreliable. How could she betray her father for Lee Yun-mu? Just think about it and you will know that this was impossible from the start. Odin was the king of Scandinavia, and he rested with his eyes shut from start to the end without the slightest worry despite what was said in the hall. On the other side, while Brunhilde wasn't easy to influence, she also wasn't completely calm in her heart. She wasn't fully confident in whether Athena would return or not. Everyone in the Scandinavian God Council was guessing the time of Athena's return when she suddenly entered the palace hall and said to Odin, Many thanks for having trust in me. I have persuaded my father, and he agreed to deal with the Eight together. After hearing Athena's good news, the Scandinavians almost started jumping in joy. The news had come at just the right time. Chapter 737, Falling to the Devil Path. Athena hadn't disappointed Brunhilde, and she went to tightly embrace her. For a moment, she had been truly afraid that Athena wouldn't return and that she had trusted the wrong person. Athena smiled bitterly, then said to Brunhilde, Did you have no doubts that I would become a mole for Zeus? Brunhilde patted her shoulder and said, I believe you. If it had been Lee Yun-mu, he would have done the same. Elder sister, I feel like you are becoming more and more like him. Brunhilde was slightly startled, then calmly said, we are gradually being influenced by him. It isn't strange. Athena nodded, then said, Elder sister, be at ease. I won't betray Scandinavia. Even if it was just for Li Yunmu, I would not do it. I persuaded Zeus, since the eight are the enemy of both of us. I learned from Zeus that everything was planned by the leader of the eight, Shiva. Shiva. So he's the one that wants our Scandinavia to fall. According to what I heard from Zeus, he wants to unify the entire origin world. His ambitions are even bigger than those of Zeus, and he wants to dip his fingers into Eastern domain. Brunhilde took out her spear and spoke in a cold voice. Then we will give the people of the eight a pleasant surprise. The two women smiled at each other. Shiva was completely in the dark about everything. Perhaps even in death he wouldn't know that Zeus had suddenly betrayed him for his daughter, which wasn't Zeus' style. At that time, Li Yunmu was still in the devil god well with his body out of control. He felt as if countless little insects were crawling down his skin. That burning and painful sensation made Li Yunmu feel that death would be better than life. And the demonic shadow's voice was still whispering in his ears. What happened? You cannot endure it already? Did you only have this much strength? Intending to beg for forgiveness so quickly. The sight of Li Yunmu lying on the ground wasn't something which anyone could endure. His distorted facial expression was like that of a drug addict, and he was in so much pain that he only wanted to ferret out the countless little insects from his body. The number of scars kept increasing as he kept rolling around on the floor. Are you ready to be infused with strength? What exactly are you doing with me? The sinister shadow smiled. I will torture you slowly and torment you. Then, I will make you fall to the devil path. Don't be nervous. The more desperate you are, the easier it is to obtain more strength. This is only a trial before you get the strength. The system was almost unable to endure watching, it actually couldn't endure Li Yunmu suffering through such torment. But his inner demons had to be vanquished, and the system was unable to help him. It could only silently watch him suffer. Li Yunmu kept rolling on the ground while shouting, I want power, give me strength. The evil shadow laughed crazily. Do you know how I appeared? Each time you used the power of the dark state, demonic beings were absorbed and gradually formed me. Then, I relied on devouring your good shadows to survive. But who could have thought that I would surprisingly see you in this region? Here, I can teach you a good lesson about displaying the demonic power to the peak. N. Your fear truly tastes delicious, the sinister shadow greedily. Li Yunmu sensed power overflowing through his meridians, and in time, he was no longer the good and kind-hearted Li Yunmu. An expression similar to that of the sinister shadow appeared on his face. That's right, just like this, continue persevering. You can soon display this power to the peak. Slowly fall to the devil path. Degrade. Ha 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 ha. The sinister shadow laughed crazily, and the system couldn't help but sigh. In the end, you chose to fall to the devil path, just like Fuxi and Nuwa had said you would. Your temperament still isn't firm. But even if you fall to the devil path, as long as you possess strength and help me remove the 5 seals, I will definitely reward you after I am resurrected even if you are a devil. The system tacitly agreed to Li Yunmu falling to the devil path, though it was actually quite indifferent to it. As long as Li Yunmu possessed true strength in the origin world and could suppress all his opponents, then regardless of whether he was a devil or a god, it wouldn't matter to the system. That was why it allowed him to fall to the devil path. When Li Yunmu opened his eyes, they were pitch black and could instill a sense of dread into anyone. Ha 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 ha, destructive power. I obtained destructive power. Li Yunmu's devil transformation became increasingly more clear. On the side, the sinister shadow excitedly said, this is truly my most perfect masterpiece. Ha ha ha, you finally turned into what I wanted, and I will concede to you. Youngster, you have strength now, so you must properly express your thanks ro me. The devil Li Yunmu smiled in a sinister manner and said, all right. Then I will properly thank you. Thank you for bestowing so much power onto me, I can feel the strength flowing through my veins. With it, I can save my loved ones. Ha ha ha, continuously display the evil in your heart to the peak. While watching the sinister shadow crazily howl with laughter, Li Yunmu walked step by step towards him. I want to carefully thank you, he said in a calm voice. After he finished speaking, Li Yunmu suddenly grabbed the shadow's neck and coldly said, you seem very delicious. If I consume you, will my strength increase even more? What the hell are you doing? It was me who gave you your strength and you want to consume me? Are you courting death? The sinister shadow turned silent after that, suddenly turning depressed. You. Li Yunmu didn't have the least bit of sympathy for him. He coldly glanced at him, then devoured him. The sinister shadow released a miserable howl, which was followed by Li Yunmu's laughter. When the shadow was consumed, the devil god well exploded and turned into ruins. That startled the river god and fire god fighting in the sky, and only then did they realize that someone had entered the devil god well. Chapter 738, The Devil Path. Fire god Zhurong and river god Gonggong had never expected that while they were protecting the ancient lands, an unexpected guest would dare to intrude. It happened only because you kept fighting with me all the time. Are you happy now? Someone entered the devil god well, I want to see how will you explain it to Fuxi. Fire god Zhurong said coldly. River god Gonggong was unwilling to take the blame, however. You also weren't overseeing it and you have the nerve to blame me? Alright, since it already happened, why aren't you hurrying to check what exactly happened? Together, they rushed to the devil god well to see what exactly had happened to cause an explosion and investigate who had entered. Li Yunmu with both his eyes completely black startled fire god Zhurong and river god Gonggong. How could they not recognize him? When he married Yuan Biao, the news had spread throughout the primordial god world, but hadn't he taken Biao to his homeland to rescue his people? Why did he return out of nowhere? Fire god Zhurong and river god Gonggong spoke to Li Yunmu unanimously. Brazen! You surprisingly dared to intrude upon the devil god well. You don't take the two of us seriously, do you? Li Yunmu's eyes were filled with viciousness. After he fell into the devil path, a terrifying imprint had appeared on his forehead. He smiled slightly. You two kept fighting endlessly, so why would I take you seriously? You. When the two ancient gods heard Li Yunmu's reply, they were left speechless. Since the moment he appeared, he didn't give them the least bit of face. Yet for the ancient lands, they would stand together. It was one of the rare times when fire god Zhurong and river god Gonggong joined hands, and it was to deal with Li Yunmu. He smiled slightly and licked his lower lip while viciously smiling at the two stupefied ancient gods. Then you both will be my first test. Show me how my newly obtained power hold up against you. His words startled the two ancient gods once more. The young man before them had truly turned into a devil, his eyes were completely different from before. Fire god Zhurong was the first one to attack. He charged at Li Yunmu while howling loudly. True Samadhi fire! Yet Li Yunmu swallowed the flame, causing fire god Zhurong's eyes almost pop out. The youth actually devoured the true Samadhi fire? Raging waves! Water rushed to attack Li Yunmu, and he slightly turned around to swallow that attack as well. The two powers collided intensely within his body at first. Soon, however, Li Yunmu felt something stir inside his body, and the two powers began to flow together in his danshan. A sinister smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and fire god Zhurong and river god Gonggong weren't able to react when the fused powers rushed out of Li Yunmu's mouth. It forced the two gods to retreat a few steps. The two ancient gods toppled to the ground and coughed out a mouthful of blood. Li Yunmu's strength was somewhat different compared to when he had just arrived at the primordial god world. His strength has surprisingly increased so quickly. After entering the devil god world and falling to the devil path, Li Yunmu's temperament had changed a lot from that of a seemingly harmless youth. Quickly report to Fuxi and Nuwa. This youngster has turned into a devil, so ask them to come and deal with him. Li Yunmu smiled coldly. Just perfect, I was also thinking about what sort of ability does Fuxi and Nuwa have. Let them come quickly. The system was constantly talking to Li Yunmu, but he seemed to have not heard any of its advice. Quickly leave this place. Your cultivation has increased, so you shouldn't continue staying in the ancient lands. Quickly leave for Scandinavia, because after Fuxi and Nuwa come, leaving will be more troublesome. However, regardless of how much the system advised him, Li Yunmu continued to provoke the two ancient gods as if he hadn't heard it. When the news of his actions reached the primordial god world, Fuxi and Nuwa were gobsmacked. When Yuan Biao had come to them with Li Yunmu, they knew that it might happen someday, but they had never expected that the day would come so quickly. He fell into the devil path. I truly shouldn't have stayed my hand back then. I should have killed him when Biao brought him here. Nuwa, don't blame yourself. You did it for Biao. Since he fell into the devil path, it is the perfect reason to eliminate him. In this way, we can also provide an explanation for Biao. Otherwise, if he hadn't entered the devil path and we killed him, how would we explain it to Yuan Biao? Your words are also correct. I understand what you mean, and that's why when Biao brought him here I didn't dare to attack. But now that he has broken the rules of the ancient lands, I cannot let him off easy. Let's go, we will go and see. But be careful in dealing with him, lest we hurt Biao. Fuxi and Nuwa had personally seen Yuan Biao grow up, so they naturally didn't want to make her suffer any pain. Li Yunmu had already fallen to the devil path, so if they hesitated any more, what if he hurt Biao? When Fuxi and Nuwa thought about it, their brows creased. By then, Li Yunmu had already destroyed half of the ancient lands. His strength was truly astonishing, and he easily covered the ancient lands in smoke and debris. Where are Fuxi and Nuwa whom you were speaking about? Don't tell me that after knowing your father's ability, they aren't even daring to show their faces, he said impatiently. Shut your mouth. You mustn't talk rudely about Fuxi and Nuwa. You ignorant mortal, who had degenerated into a devil and will encounter ninth heaven's thunder tribulation. Li Yunmu smiled viciously, then charged at Fire God and River God. You two are defending them so much, so I will torture you two first. Hearing Li Yunmu's words, Fire God and River God's complexion changed. When Li Yunmu stretched his hand out, it suddenly turned into a claw, and Fire God and River God's bodies went out of control. They began to float in the air. The mortal who had fallen into the devil path, what exactly did he intend to do with them? Torment, isn't it greatly convenient for you two? The faces of the two ancient gods changed quickly when waves of unbearable pain rushed into their stomachs. Ah, 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 ah. Because of the piercing pain, they couldn't help but grunt in pain. Chapter 739, 9 Heaven Thunder Tribulation. Stay your hand for me. A loud shout came from the primordial god world, shaking the entire ancient lands. Fire god Zurong and River god Gonggong were then rescued by the two masters of primordial god world. They felt that half of their lives had been cast away. If it were not for Fuxi and Nuwa rescuing them in time, it was likely that they would have been devoured by the devil Li Yunmu. The two gods toppled to the ground while spitting out mouthfuls of blood. Fortunately, their lives and cultivation had been preserved. Suddenly, a zither appeared in Fuxi's hand. When he prodded one of its strings, a wave of energy split open the space and rushed to attack Li Yunmu. He rolled to the side and dodged Fuxi's attack. Haha, Fuxi's strength is only so-so. Too audacious Li Yunmu, you have already broken the rules of the ancient lands and you still injured the ancient gods. I will subdue you in place of ninth heaven. Li Yunmu, we gave you a new opportunity at life by giving face to S.H.A.D.O.W. I hadn't expected that you would be so savage and turn into a devil, so you shouldn't blame me and H.A.C.K for not being polite towards you. Upon hearing H.A.C.K and Nuwa's words, Li Yunmu sneered at them. Don't use your hypocritical feelings towards S.H.A.D.O.W. You didn't even listen to her request and misjudged me, Li Yunmu. I have no more hope for your primordial god world. You have already fallen to the devil path, so we came to capture you in place of ninth heaven. Come. Since you had the confidence to allow me to fall to the devil path, then you should also be able to endure the aftermath of me turning into a devil, Li Yunmu said coldly. Stubborn. Today we will sacrifice you. Nuwa turned into a gigantic snake and charged at Li Yunmu. But he who had fallen to the devil path had some ability, and his strength was on equal terms with ancient gods. Li Yunmu sinisterly smiled and said, Do you think I am the same as before? I have already been tested by the devil god well, ha ha ha. Li Yunmu constantly dodged Nuwa's attack and H.A.C.K's energy arrows from his zither. When faced with the joint power of the two ancient gods, he found it quite strenuous to persevere. Even if he had become a devil and his cultivation had increased a lot, he was still facing the two ancient gods of the ancient lands who were the backbone of the region. Li Yunmu had only obtained his strength recently, so how could he fight against H.A.C.K and Nuwa who had slain countless devils? The system sighed in Li Yunmu's body. He had already missed the best opportunity to escape and could not do it anymore. Whatever came, he had to continue fighting. The system sighed at that. It doesn't matter. First, I must assist the youngster in escaping this calamity. Li Yunmu couldn't hear the system's words nor the rewards it sent him. Ding! Congratulations host, system experience plus 1000000. The system has been upgraded. Ding! Congratulations host, space elements plus 100,000. Ding! Congratulations host, you have obtained 100 dimensional stones. Ding! Congratulations host, you have gained devil power, which can destroy and create the heavens. It can also cause people to lose their 7 emotions and 6 desires and tread the devil path. Ding! You have obtained a new skill Devil Transform, Heaven Falls and Earth Rends. Skill, Devil Transform, Heaven Falls and Earth Rends. Ability, Heaven and Earth will be ruined. If a god stands in the way, kill the god, if a Buddha is in the way, then kill the Buddha. Side effects, similar to Dark State, but you will be unable to disperse Devil Transformation's reaction. Pay attention, this skill is extremely formidable, so use carefully. Li Yunmu didn't pay attention to the final reminder. Since he had been forced into dire straits by the two ancient gods in front of him before obtaining the system's assistance, he was naturally going to use it. Ha ha ha! Li Yunmu laughed sinisterly, and his smile shook the world. H.A.C.K and Nuwa turned red. They had beheaded countless devils and demons, but it was the first time they had encountered such a thorny mortal turned devil. It seems like a formidable power was concealed in his body, which has allowed him to battle this long. This mortal surprisingly became this formidable after transforming into a devil. Abominable, he truly is somewhat difficult to deal with. We really shouldn't have allowed him to fall to the devil path. It is difficult to get rid of him now. It doesn't matter. I have already thought of a good way to deal with him. I will attract the 9 heaven thunder tribulation and let him have a taste of it. Nuwa was slightly startled. The mortal would turn into a ball of blood and flesh after the 9 heaven thunder tribulation. The smoke would scatter and his ashes would go with the wind, then when Yuan Biao learned about it, wouldn't she grieve herself to death? Their surroundings changed instantly, and thunder descended from the sky. Explosions rocked the ruined ancient lands, and the entire world turned dusky. The 9 heaven thunder tribulation impartially attacked everything around Li Yunmu. If someone else, like the fire god or river god, were hit, they would have been turned into a pulp, and even no ashes would have been left of them. But a defensive shield surrounded Li Yunmu, its golden light protecting him from any harm. That is heavenly armor. Impossible, he has turned into a devil, so how can he have a heavenly armor protecting his body? The system's patience had almost run out. It had told Li Yunmu countless times to not fight against Fuxi and Nuwa, but he hadn't paid any attention to it, so it had no choice but to take action. Given the surroundings, the system could only use the heavenly armor. Otherwise, Li Yunmu's mortal body would be completely annihilated by the 9-heaven thunder tribulation. The fire god and river god had thought that Li Yunmu would find it difficult to escape death in front of the 9-heaven thunder tribulation. Yet who knew that he would bring out the heavenly armor of the ancient lands to protect himself? They couldn't help but suspect his identity. How could this mortal possibly possess the heavenly armor to protect himself? Nuwa was also unable to understand it, and her eyes filled with astonishment. She shuddered without stop. It was already difficult to find a mortal who was evenly matched them, but he also had the heavenly armor to protect himself, which she found incredulous. Fuxi took a deep breath and said, "The world wouldn't kill a criminal who had turned into a devil, so what should we do now?" His voice was filled with helplessness, and Nuwa couldn't help but recoil. It seemed that Li Yunmu did have some ability, but unfortunately, he hadn't walked the correct path and the devil god well had instead turned him into a devil. Chapter 740, Devil Paths. Li Ying. Devil god well had been producing devils for several centuries, but no one who had entered there had turned into a god. Li Yunmu also wasn't an exception, but a mortal turning into a devil could already be considered as legendary. Furthermore, he was even fighting on equal terms with the protectors of the primordial god world Fuxi and Nuwa. From it was clear that after falling to the devil path, his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. Fire god Zurong and river god Gonggong couldn't help but sigh. This mortal can surprisingly resist the 9-heaven thunder tribulation. Can he already command the devils? The two gods kept sighing when they heard a burst of mad laughter from the direction of the devil god well. The sounds made Fuxi and Nuwa's complexion change. "Ha ha ha, this youngster is the new generation's powerhouse of our devil world, he seems useful to me. Youngster, if you are willing to follow me to the devil world, I will allow you to increase your cultivation again so you can massacre the primordial god world." Li Ying. Fuxi and Nuwa looked at the shadow, which was the king of the devil world Li Yin. He had been cultivating in the devil world for a millennium and had always been an enemy of the primordial god world. Only because of the devil god well did the devils of the devil world were unable to cross over to the ancient lands. But the devil god well had been destroyed by Li Yunmu. Once it turned into ruins, it was the perfect opportunity for the people of the devil world to enter, which was why Li Ying suddenly appeared. He wore a black gown and took the form of a shadow which happened to be similar to the sinister shadow which Li Yunmu had encountered in the devil god well. When Li Ying turned formless, no one was able to see his facial features. They could only see a mass of black mist. "Fuxi, Nuwa, long time no see. I hadn't expected that this new generation's expert of the devil world would bring you so many inconveniences." The outcome of the battle between Li Ying and Nuwa with Fuxi hundreds of years ago had been undecided. The trifling 9 heavens tribulation thunder were only floating clouds in their eyes. While that was happening, the system was talking to Li Yunmu from the bottom of its heart. "Quickly wake up. This Li Ying is a very dangerous guy." But Li Yunmu had lost all reason, and he only laughed devilishly. "All right. This is the perfect opportunity to take a trip to the devil world and obtain the power I want. Ha ha ha. Li Yunmu, if you go to the devil world with Li Ying, you will never be able to return. You will be trapped on the devil path, eternally unable to get free." Fuxi shouted at Li Yunmu, but Li Yunmu didn't listen to him. "Hehe, Fuxi and Nuwa, this is your punishment. Wait until I go to the devil world and obtain the power I want, then I will definitely return to the ancient lands and massacre everyone in the primordial god world." Li Yunmu's words startled Fuxi and Nuwa, while Li Ying kept laughing crazily. Ha 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 ha, F.H.A.C.K and Nuwa, clean your necks and obediently wait for your death. I am sure we will meet again. Li Ying's black mist faded away and disappeared from the ancient lands with Li Yunmu. By coincidence, Yuan Biao also saw that scene, and she shouted hoarsely, Li Yunmu! Li Yunmu! Where are you taking Li Yunmu? When the black mist was already gone, Yuan Biao still extended her hand in an attempt to grab it. No! Li Yunmu, you cannot fall to become the devil. Never! Hearing Yuan Biao's shouting hoarsely and sobbing spasmodically, F.H.A.C.K and Nuwa felt paired, but they were unable to change something that had already happened. Biao, quickly stand up. He is no longer the Li Yunmu you knew. After he fell to the devil path, he turned into an enemy of our primordial god world, F.H.A.C.K patiently said while supporting her up. Nuwa also guided her up. Biao, forget about this man in the future. He isn't worthy of your efforts. He followed after Li Ying and entered the devil world, so from this moment on, his only thought is to destroy the primordial god world. Biao resolutely flung aside F.H.A.C.K and Nuwa's hand, then said while gnashing her teeth, the two of you didn't agree to shelter him. If you had given him shelter and allowed him to recover his cultivation in the primordial god world, would he still have chosen to enter the devil god well? Do you know why he wanted to increase his cultivation quickly? Do you think he was influenced by greed? He only wanted to recover his cultivation to protect his loved ones and defend his people. Was that wrong? But just for your so-called primordial god world, your so-called dignity of gods, you forced him onto the devil path. Where did your morals go then? You did it only to satisfy your selfish desires. You both only thought of getting rid of him because you were afraid of the being inside his body. Hearing Yuan Biao's criticism, F.H.A.C.K and Nuwa looked at each other but didn't say anything. They were unable to explain all of their reasoning to her. I won't believe you two any longer. I know you have watched over me from childhood and are my guardians, but when I brought Li Yunmu to the primordial god world to ask for your help, you refused me directly. From that moment onwards, our relationship was completely severed. Biao. How can you talk to F.H.A.C.K and Nuwa like that? Fire god Zurong and river god Gonggong said from not far away. Biao, hear me out. I and F.H.A.C.K did that because I saw that Li Yunmu was being corroded from inside and he possessed a fiend origin, so he would have turned into a devil sooner or later. Yuan Biao smiled coldly and said, you don't know why Li Yunmu absorbed the demonic particles into his body. Neither of you know why he fell to the devil path. You don't understand him, but I do. I will tell you why his body was corroded. It was because he had absorbed the demonic particles to save the common people of the central desert. He hadn't lost his reason. I am proud of his righteousness, and there is no shame in his heart. He increased his cultivation to protect his people and his loved ones. Who among you have the qualifications to judge him? You are not qualified. Nuwa slapped Yuan Biao, then said, Yuan Biao, I and F.H.A.C.K are the masters of the primordial god world. If you continue talking to us like that, then henceforth you will have no relation with the primordial god world. Get lost from the ancient lands. Hearing Nuwa's chiding, Yuan Biao sneered, and soon, her figure disappeared from the ancient land. She went straight for the devil world. Ah! She left for the devil world. Has the lassie gone crazy? She will be attacked by devilish beings. It's only courting death going in there. F.H.A.C.K anxiously said. Nuwa shuddered, feeling great sadness in her heart. She hadn't expected that Yuan Biao would misunderstand their intentions to such an extent and that her feelings for Li Yunmu would be so deep.